Have you ever noticed that your most expensive purchases tend to happen when you're feeling the most alone? There's this very weird phenomena where loneliness doesn't make us save money for human connection, it makes us spend money instead of human connection. We're not buying things anymore. We're buying the feeling of belonging to something, even if that something is just a brand or consumerism. I'm Hannah. This is Your Brain on Money. And today I want to talk about something that's happening to millions of us, but no one's actually discussing, which is how the loneliness epidemic is quietly reshaping our spending habits in ways that are making us broker and more socially isolated at the same time. So, I want to start by talking about two trends that shouldn't be happening simultaneously, but are. The first is that Americans report record levels of loneliness. According to recent research, over 60% of adults report feeling lonely regularly. Young adults are the loneliest generation in recorded history. We have fewer close friends than any previous generation, and meaningful social interactions have plummeted since 2020. The second thing is that luxury spending is at an all time high, not just among the wealthy, among everybody. And I'm just not even talking about luxury spending, I'm talking about rampant consumerism. And most of this is coming from younger, middle income consumers who often can't afford what they're buying, or they're buying things in the way of their long term financial growth. Now, conventional economic thinking would say that these trends are unrelated or even contradictory, right? If people are struggling financially, why are they buying things? If people are lonely, why aren't they spending more money on experiences and social activities instead of stuff? But that is exactly the wrong question to be asking. The right question is, what if spending is the loneliness? What if we're not buying despite being isolated? We're buying because we're so isolated. Because here's the thing that's actually happening. As our real world social connections have deteriorated, brands have gotten increasingly sophisticated at selling us artificial belonging. And it's working. We're spending money to feel like we're part of something, a community, an aesthetic, an identity, even when that community only exists in our feeds and our packages. And this isn't just about like financial irresponsibility. It's about human beings desperately trying to meet a fundamental psychological need, an entire economy that's learned to exploit that desperation. So I actually first noticed this link myself during the pandemic, and I didn't fully understand it until I was looking at it months later, right? Like I was living alone, working from home, and I started getting really into skincare. Not just buying skincare, I mean really into it. I joined the subreddits, I watched the YouTube reviews, I started following all these beauty influencers. I could tell you the pH level of different toners and like all the ingredients that went into skincare. And look, there's nothing wrong with having hobbies. But the thing that I realized is it's not the skincare. What I wanted to do was be part of the skincare community and connect with other people about the products I was buying, of understanding the references, of being able to comment on someone else's routine. The purchases I was making were just the price of admission to feel like I belonged to something. Every package I got felt like that validation that I was part of the world. The money I spent wasn't really about the products. It was about purchasing the feeling of being connected to people who shared my interests. Except that interest is manufactured and the community around consumerism is largely parasocial. I was spending hundreds of dollars a month to kind of feel less alone or fill that like emotional void that a loneliness really leaves. However, shopping or buying tangible items often will not fill that void or create this flywheel that will leave you wanting more and more. And that's when I started paying attention to how many of us are doing this exact thing. So, how do we get here? How do brands figure out that isolated people are the best customers? It really comes down to three interconnected mechanisms that are operating on us, often without our conscious awareness. And the first thing is that parasocial relationships are the perfect shopping incentive. So let's talk about it. Parasocial relationships are the psychological term for one-sided relationships that where you feel close to someone who doesn't know you exist. So yes, that's celebrities, but that's also influencers, content creators, even brands themselves. And what's changed in the past couple of years is that brands have figured out that lonely people will pay money to maintain or to feel like they belong in these parasocial relationships. Maybe you're not buying a sweater because it's a sweater. You're buying it because you saw your favorite influencer wearing it. And buying it makes it feel like you're part of that person's tribe, that you're close with that person. Or maybe you're not buying that item you're seeing all over TikTok. You're buying it because you want to fit into like a certain aesthetic, like clean girl aesthetic, cottagecore, etc. Research shows that the strength of parasocial relationships directly predicts purchasing behavior. And that effect is strongest among people who report high levels of loneliness. Lonely people don't just watch influencer content more, they're significantly more likely to purchase products based on that content. Why? Because the purchase feels like participation. It feels like you're joining the club, becoming part of the in-group, strengthening your connection to that person you feel you know. But here's the trap. Buying the thing doesn't actually create the connection you're seeking. It just creates a temporary feeling of connection, which then requires another purchase to maintain. So the second mechanism is digital dark patterns. And this is something that's even more insidious. It's how shopping platforms have been redesigned to specifically exploit lonely people. So, dark patterns are design tricks that manipulate you into doing what the company wants. And if you're spending more time online because you're socially isolated, which most lonely people are, you're exposed to exponentially more of these manipulation tactics. If you think about things like only two left in stock, that's a type of artificial scarcity. Or 12 people are viewing this product right now. That is social proof through other people's behavior. Customers who brought this also brought. Again, that creates that artificial community through purchasing patterns. And if you notice what all these have in common, they're not selling you the product based on whether you need it. They're selling you the product based on social signals, scarcity, popularity, what other people are doing, being part of a complete collection. And the kicker is that the more time you spend online, which again, lonely people disproportionately do, the more these patterns affect you. Studies show that each additional hour spent on shopping apps and social media increases susceptibility to the manipulation tactics by 15 to 20%. Your isolation isn't just making you vulnerable to one purchase, it's creating the conditions where you're being constantly psychologically manipulated to purchase as a substitute through connection. The third mechanism is all about identity. And this is the deepest mechanism, and it's worth really understanding. We are increasingly constructing our identities through what we consume rather than what we do or who we're connected to. Think about the way that people describe themselves in terms of like aesthetics, like going back to clean girl or cottage core or what have you. These aren't really necessarily descriptions of personality or values. They are descriptions of purchasing patterns. And why this matters for lonely people specifically is you have fewer people reflecting your identity back to you through interaction. So you need these other ways to establish who you are to yourself and to other people. In strong social communities, your identity is co-created through relationships. If you've ever heard of the phrase, you're kind of the makeup of the five people around you, so to speak. Your friends know you're funny because they've laughed at your jokes. Your family knows you're kind because they've witnessed your kindness. Your identity is reinforced through hundreds of these small social interactions. But when you're isolated, you construct identity through consumption. You buy things that signal who you want to be. You curate aesthetics that you communicate your identity to an imagined audience. You purchase products that make you feel like the person you're trying to become. But here's a psychological trap. Identity built through consumption is inherently unstable. It requires constant maintenance through continued purchasing because you never quite buy enough to feel like you're securely established in that identity. Research also shows that people who describe their identity primarily through their aesthetic or consumption spend more on discretionary purchases than people who describe their identity through relationships, activities, or values. And lonely people report higher financial stress and have a less stable sense of self. We are literally spending ourselves into debt trying to buy our way into feeling like real people with real identities. Okay, so we've established the mechanisms. Now let's talk about why this is so hard to escape because it's not just loneliness that drives spending, it's the spending that makes the loneliness worse in a lot of cases. Here's something that happens when you start using purchases to meet emotional needs. Buying things starts replacing doing things. You're lonely, you feel uncomfortable, so you buy yourself to make yourself feel better. It's a self-soothing thing. That gives you that temporary dopamine hit, something to look forward to, something to think about, the excitement of the package coming. It's often cheaper and less of a social cost than going out, right? It doesn't require coordinating schedules or putting yourself out there or having to endure kind of awkward social interactions, right? But every purchase that replaces a social experience reinforces a neural pathway that says, buying things makes me feel better instead of connecting with people makes me feel better. Neuroscience research shows that for chronically lonely people, shopping activates reward centers in the brain more strongly than social interaction does. Not because shopping is objectively more rewarding, it's because the neural pathways for getting rewarded from social connection have weakened over time through disuse. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to prefer purchasing over connecting. And the more that happens, the more awkward and unrewarding actual social connection feels, which makes you more likely to choose purchasing next time. Now, add into that the financial consequences. You're spending money that you probably shouldn't to feel less lonely. That creates financial stress. Financial stress is one of the most isolating experiences humans have. We often hide it. We don't want to talk about it. We're ashamed of it. We avoid situations where a financial situation might be exposed. So maybe you start declining social invitations because you can't afford them. You avoid friends who might notice your spending habits or you just don't want to admit to them kind of what's going on. And you feel shame about your financial situation, which makes you withdraw further, which makes you lonelier, which makes you more likely to shop to self-soothe. Think of it like a flywheel, right? Loneliness drives spending. Spending creates financial stress. Financial stress increases more isolation, and isolation drives more spending. It's literally just a vicious cycle where each turn makes the next turn more likely and more extreme. And then there's the algorithmic amplification of all of this. The more you shop online while isolated, the more the algorithms learn what you like, what kind of things you want to buy. So they're able to target you with advertising that might appeal to you more. They surface more products they think you'll want. Meanwhile, the social media algorithms notice that you're engaging with consumption content. So they might show you more influencers, more aesthetic content, more shopping. The algorithms are optimizing for engagement and purchases. They're not optimizing for your well-being or your bank account. These algorithms are extremely, extremely intelligent. Research on algorithmic filter bubbles shows that users who are heavy consumption-focused users see 3 to 4 times more shopping content than users who aren't. And that creates a digital environment that makes it nearly impossible to not be constantly thinking about purchasing in some way. So if you feel like, oh, I don't know why I impulse bought this thing, or I don't know why I'm struggling to not spend money while on social media, it's not that you're weak willed. You're living in a digital environment that has been optimized to extract money from you, and especially if you're lonely. So if this is happening to so many of us, why does it feel like nobody is talking about it? I think the first thing is that we have really rebranded isolation in a lot of ways as a personality trait. I think somewhere along the way, being comfortable with minimal social connection becomes synonymous with being an introvert, right? And I think people just feel like they want to shelter online or shelter with each other instead of going out and kind of having to interact with other people, because there's a lot of aspects of social interaction that can be awkward, you know? And I think that explains what we're seeing with the loneliness epidemic and the way that people are spending more time by themselves and online. And I think there's a piece of how we reframe shopping itself. I think, using terminology like buying this is self-care, I'm investing in myself, I'm treating myself, like the whole little tree culture, like so much of that is just consumption being rebranded and repackaged as self-care to help you justify purchasing it. And it's genius from a marketing perspective, right? It takes an activity that might produce guilt, spending money that you don't have on things you don't need, and turns it into an activity that can be equated with virtue, like taking care of yourself. But what's actually wild about all of this is that actual self-care is usually free or cheap, right? Like sleep, exercise, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones. Those are examples of self-care. Buying luxury goods, buying, I don't know, junk online is not self-care. It's consumption marketed as self-care. And for lonely people especially, it becomes a substitute for actual care, either from others or for ourselves. And when people do struggle with this, we treat it as a personal failure rather than a systemic issue. Oh, you're having an issue with shopping, you just need more self-control, right? You're in debt, you just need to budget better, right? And yes, individual choices matter here. But what this framing misses is that you are operating in an environment where companies are spending millions and millions of dollars designed to psychologically get you to spend more. So your brain is constantly working against all these different forces, which can be very difficult, right? Pitting your individual willpower against the algorithms that are designed to exploit your psychology, dark patterns that are optimized through millions of dollars in A/B tests, influencer marketing that leverages those parasocial relationships, and an economy that has figured out how to monetize loneliness, it is not a fair fight. And so, yes, I think discipline is a piece of this, but it's not just personal discipline. It's about living in a system that's discovered it can profit from human isolation and is actively working to maintain and exploit that isolation. Okay, so what do we actually do about this? Because awareness is step one, but it obviously is not enough to drive action. Okay, so here's a list of tips I always give people. The first one is to track the feeling, not just the spending. Most traditional budgeting advice tells you to track what you spend. That's fine, yes, but it misses the point. You also need to track the emotions that are happening before and after you spend. So for a week, 2 weeks, every time you make a non-essential purchase, pause and write it down in your iPhone notes app, pen to paper, and think about, what emotion am I feeling? Have I recently had a social interaction? Was I scrolling social media before? Did I feel like the purchase would solve some sort of emotion? Like, am I feeling, maybe I'm feeling really sad about something and I thought this purchase might help me. What you're looking for are patterns. Are you shopping when you're lonely, bored, anxious, or after seeing a certain type of content? And once you start to understand these patterns, you can interrupt it. Not by forcing yourself to not shop anymore, but by recognizing, maybe I don't actually want this thing. I'm just feeling lonely, and my brain is suggesting shopping as a solution. That recognition alone gives you the space to choose a different response. The second thing I recommend is to replace the function, not just the behavior. And here's what I mean by that. This is what most financial advice fails at. It tells you to stop shopping without helping you replace what shopping was doing for you psychologically. If shopping is how you create excitement and anticipation in your life, you need to create excitement and anticipation through other means. If shopping is how you felt like you were getting your life together and improving your life, you need to find other ways to feel that progress. If shopping is how you felt like you participate in a community, you need to then find an actual community to participate in. And this is harder than it sounds because online shopping is designed to be easier than those alternatives. but it's so essential to do this. Some of the replacements to shopping that you can just think about is like, okay, instead of browsing, shopping when I'm lonely, maybe I'll text my friends and check in. Maybe instead of buying a bunch of things to feel like I'm fitting into an aesthetic, maybe I can create something with what I already have. Or maybe I can work on finding a hobby community or another community that isn't centered on consumption. Maybe instead of like just doom scrolling, I want to engage with people, right? And again, the goal is not that you're never going to shop again. That's impossible. It's just to make sure that shopping is not your primary coping mechanism for loneliness. The third thing is to create friction. Since the problem is partially that shopping has become frictionless while isolated, like again, a lot of times you can buy something with like one click. The solution is to add that friction back in. So, for example, delete some of the shopping apps from your phone, unsubscribe from those promotional emails. You can also use some browser extensions that block shopping sites during certain hours and remove your credit card payment from your computer. That way, even though like the 5 seconds you have to get up and go get your credit card to buy something, that creates friction that gives you time to stop and think. You want to make it so that when you want to buy something, you have to actively choose to do it rather than being like swept up in this frictionless paths the platforms have created. And again, what this really is giving your brain time to engage the decision making parts rather than the emotional response parts. Like you're eliminating the automatic, emotionally driven shopping that happens when algorithms catch you in a vulnerable moment. A strategy is to invest in connection. This is one of the harder ones, but possibly the most important is that you need to actively invest in rebuilding your connection infrastructure if you're lonely. That means regular, scheduled social time, even if you don't feel like it. Joining groups in person, responding to invitations, even if it's easier to be at home, building routines that include other humans. I understand it can feel very difficult and hard to build community and connection in today's society. And I will say, making new friends, building a community, it requires you showing up over and over again and also putting yourself out there. A lot of human connection can be awkward and messy, and that's just part of the process. And it's about just showing up continuously and putting yourself out there. And that is really the path forward to building those pathways for our community. And again, I know this can feel impossibly hard when you're already lonely and financially stressed, but the loneliness shopping cycle won't break down on its own. Shopping will never make you feel connected enough to stop needing to shop. The only thing that will break this sort of cycle is actual connection. And like I said before, it's messy, it's awkward, it requires showing up when you'd rather not, but it also is the only thing that will probably meet that loneliness need that you're actively trying to fill. So here's my question for you, and I want you to really think about this one. What's the last purchase you've made that was about the thing, but was actually about something else? Like, what were you trying to buy? Maybe it was connection or identity, the relief from feeling alone. And I'm curious if you want to write in the comments, and there's no judgment. I mean, we've all done this. I'm just really curious about what patterns we're kind of all experiencing right now. And if this video made you realize something comfortable about your own spending patterns, good. That discomfort is the first step towards changing something. Subscribe for more videos about money psychology and hit the notification bell so you can catch the next one.